All right. Good morning to those of you on the East Coast. Good morning also to those of you on the West Coast. I'm your host, Brandon Troy, also co creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. And thanks so much for joining us wherever you're watching from. As you all know, every week we try to give you a breakdown of the goings on in entertainment and pop culture, if you will, in our show known as This Week in Pop Culture, giving you the spark notes, the cliff notes, if you will, of the goings on in entertainment and pop culture in the past said week. Happy Thanksgiving to those of you out there. Hopefully you guys had some good fellowship with family and friends, as well as enjoying some incredible food that you guys are probably hopefully you still have some leftovers left over from those said days. But typically, when we do this show for This Week in Pop Culture, I am not alone in talking about these said topics. So I want to welcome my co-host, Spillman Trueheart, aka Spills. What is going on, sir? Oh, we lost your lost your audio, sir. Let's see if we can hear you. Well, I tell you what, we're going to give Spillman a second to hop off and hop back on. But as I said, hopefully you guys had a terrific Thanksgiving holiday. Looks like we have him back. Let's see if we can get him on now.
Oh,
There we go. All right,
all
now
right,
we
ladies and
got you.
gentlemen, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, great. I just wanted to say that Jack Frost is out here. It's very cold. The little frost warning was on my car this morning. And if you are eating leftovers from Thanksgiving, today is the last day. If you're trying to eat them tomorrow, third Tuesday, Wednesday, throw that food away. Y'all can't be eating that food that's been sitting out since Thursday. That's you can't eat that stuff. You should have stopped being greedy. Give your friends and family the to-go plate because you can't possibly eat that much turkey. And so, just food
I hear
safety,
you.
ladies and gentlemen. You don't want to
I
go
hear
to
you,
the
sir.
emergency room. Yeah,
Thank you for that PSA, sir.
yeah,
Thank you
yeah,
for
yeah.
the PSA. With that being said, Spillman, we did have some things that went on this past week. So shall we dive right in?
Let's get it.
All right, cool. So the first one that we're going to talk of is unfortunately we did have passing that happened this past week with Chuck Woolery, the iconic game show host. And just to give you, some details, as I said, it happened last week, passing away at the age of 83. Chuck Woolery, of course, is iconic in the world of game show hosts. If we're talking about Wheel of Fortune, if we're talking about Love Connection, um, the news was came courtesy of his friend and podcast co-host Mark Young last Saturday. And just to give you some slight background information on Mr. Woolery, of course he was born as Chuck Hubert Woolery on March 16th, 1941, in Ashland, Kentucky. He started out in show business, which I didn't even know, Spills, as a singer in the orchestral pop band, the Avant Garde, whose most famous song, Naturally Stoned, made it to number 40 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart in 1968. As I mentioned before, most folks, of course, including myself, remember him as a game show host, kicking off with Wheel of Fortune and then later with Love Connection, among various others. Spillman, what are your thoughts on Mr. Woolery's passing?
Oh yeah. It's very sad to see Chuck Woolery go. He's very good as a talk as a game show host, but I remember him for some of his like non-sequitur appearances in various comedies over the years.
That's fair.
Um, I think I remember him in hold on, let's look at some of these movies. Yeah, but he was a great actor. I think he was great. Obviously he's not from my Wheel of Fortune. That's not our Wheel of Fortune. That's grandma's
Yes,
Wheel of Fortune.
yes, yes,
We are the Pat Sajak generation.
yes, yes.
I feel like that's a Pat Sajak show. He's probably number two, but I'm sure that they're the only two that hosted that show. Um, but definitely remember him from the Love Connection, and that's been spoofed
So much.
like so much. It was a zeitgeist moment. I feel like the Wheel of Fortune bit was good for him, but he didn't have the same level of exposure with Wheel of Fortune to me. I am almost 40. Like, don't let
Yes.
this spry youthful expression confuse you guys. I'm almost 40, so I do remember his stuff from the Love Connection, but him on the Wheel of Fortune was, I didn't really see him in the format, obviously. Um, but shout outs to Vanna, you know who you are. Shout outs to you, Vanna White. How do you feel about
Indeed,
it?
indeed. So same as you, I'm gonna age myself a little bit as well in that I wasn't around in that era for for Woolery when he was doing Wheel of Fortune. I actually learned a little something myself, in doing research on Woolery in that he started with that show in its heyday when that show was at first aired, and actually it wasn't even known as Wheel of Fortune. I know there's some folks older than us that are aware of this, but I didn't even know this. Is Wheel of Fortune was formerly known as Shoppers Bazaar, and he was named as the host of that renamed show, being renamed, of course, as Wheel of Fortune when it premiered on NBC on January 6th, 1975. So yeah, about almost nearly a decade um, prior to us, Spillman, or maybe a little less for you, Spills. But he wouldn't start Love Connection until 1983, and of course he would do that show for more than he would do it for 11 years from 1983 to 1994. But of course he went on to do other shows. For those that recall, he did Lingo on the game show network. He did Greed on Fox. I do remember that when he was doing that show. And he also did a rebooted dating game show as well. But as you said, iconic game show host, right up there with Bob Barker. If we're talking about Price is Right, you know, um, incredible game show hosts. And if we're talking about game show hosts, I feel like it is a lost art in today's current climate when we're talking about TV, where it takes a very special, I feel, skill set to be able to pull that off. You were talking about what he has done in films that you've seen, and people don't really think about this, but there is a level, that same level of performance that you would have with acting is necessary as a game show host too, because you have to have that rapport with the audience. You have to have that charisma where people like you and people trust you, and he very much had that when we're talking about those shows that he made iconic. Whether we're talking about Wheel of Fortune for those who were around before us, some of our relatives who are older than us, and even in our era when we're talking about Love Connection and being able to act as that mediator, right, if you will, between those two said parties that are in that courtship with one another. So shout out again to Chuck Woolery, passing away at 83. Condolences to family and friends. But yes, iconic game show host. Any last thoughts, Spilling, before we hop into sports? Okay. All right, cool. Um, and let's see here. Spillman, we're gonna hop over to sports. I'm gonna give you a second. If you could, I'm gonna have you hop back on again. I don't know if there's some tech related thing with the audio going on. I think you had just gone out just for a second. But while we're doing that, we're going to switch gears into sports, and we're gonna talk some NBA more specifically. So let's see if we can get Spielman back here with us.
Am I better now? Sorry about that, guys. It's
Yeah,
when I
no,
mute.
all
I'm not
good,
going to
man.
mute. I'm
All
not going to
good,
mute.
all
Yeah,
good.
it's. I think
Perfect
it's when I
timing.
mute.
We're gonna talk NBA. We're gonna talk more specifically about the new All Star format, Spillman. So this past week we did get further details regarding the NBA All Star game. There, of course, has been a lot of talk about the new format with this game, and I wanted to get your thoughts. But I'm gonna backtrack, if you will, for those of you out there watching to bring you up to speed. So in the last few years, the NBA All Star Weekend, particularly the NBA All Star Game, has left, I guess you can say, a lot to be desired, to put it as I feel like it's an understatement, but left a lot to be desired as players have been criticized for their lack of effort in the game currently now, especially in this era that we have with load management, right? So as a response to the current state of fans dwindling enthusiasm for this weekend that we have in during the NBA season, which typically happens in February, as well as this main event game. The NBA is instituting a new four-team tournament style format for the 2025 All Star Game. This format is expected to have two semifinal games played up to 40 points, with the winners advancing to the final match up to 25 points, according to sources that had told ESPN, resembling the pickup game format that I'm sure many of us are accustomed to. If you're playing out at the park, or if you're playing at a recreation center, where the winner moves to the championship round in single elimination play. The teams will can be comprised of three all-star teams of 8 players each, as well as the winner of the Rising Stars game. For those of you who are not aware, that Rising Stars game is a game between our rookies and our second year players. So the winner of that said game that happens over All Star Weekend will be included among those 4 teams, total teams that will be participating for this All Star tournament play. The 4 teams would face each other in matchups where we have team one, for instance, versus team three, and team two versus team four, and the winner moves on to the final round. The All Star game is scheduled for February 16th at San Francisco Chase Center next year, so 2025. Spillman, what are your thoughts on the new format?
Um, so I feel like this is exercise in trying to fix a problem that is throughout sports, where we have players who are playing the exhibition, but we are expecting them to actually play to the full tilt, and that's just not something they do during the All-Star game. All-Star game is an extra game. Technically, you do not get paid for that. I mean, you do get paid, obviously, but it's not like it counts towards your win totals. Like you could score 100 in the All-Star game, and that won't affect anything because it's technically not an NBA game. So I do understand why those guys be trying not to get hurt because it's millions and millions of dollars, and also millions of eyes on them. So getting embarrassed is something that people just don't want to do. So there's been a lot of complaints in every sport. That notoriously the Pro Bowl is known for them not playing tackle football no more. So I think this is interesting. Um, I feel like they should have done this a little while ago, including the winner of the rookie sophomore game.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good bit because oftentimes future greats, just by the nature of the sport, are not selected as all stars. I believe
Yes,
LeBron didn't even make it his first year.
correct.
Um,
Yes.
so if there's a way to get more eyes on the stars, that's great for the league. But I feel like we're just trying stuff to try to make these games entertaining because um, it's just not entertaining. And it's like they go through a lot. They get Mariah Carey to sing for it and stuff. So I get it. They get the stars to try to get the eyes on the All Star game. It's a big thing. It's kind of the
Yeah.
Super Bowl for the black folks. It's like black people Super Bowl. So I understand why they're trying to make it better, but I feel like they should just make it the All Star game and just be a little more chill. I think maybe if they were more chill about it, it wouldn't be such a big deal, and then they wouldn't have so many issues. What do you think?
Okay, so I'm gonna start by just putting the actual picture up here because I feel like it's a great reflection of where the state of the game is right now.
They
If you're
just let that man
noticing,
score.
you having a player score and everyone else is just looking around. You have four defenders on the other team just looking at the opposing team score, and I feel like that's a great kind of semblance of what we're talking about when we're saying the state of this exhibition game, as you said. And so I'm not going to go into absolute detail about it because I feel like I've talked about it at nauseum of load management in prior episodes. So you can check out prior episodes about my other rants. So I'll try to keep it succinct and brief. But when we're talking about today's game and load management, again, there's nothing wrong with the idea of being able to for players to be protected, from injuries. And injuries happen. It's just the nature of sports. However, if we're talking about the severity of injuries, there are injuries that are pretty minuscule that I feel like you could still play through, and there are those injuries that are very serious, and it's imperative for you to not play and to heal before you step back on the court. And so we've had too many instances of that where I feel like if we're talking about the era of the 80s, the 90s, and even the early 2000s, where, yeah, there were players that were banged up. They had, a sprain here, they had a bruise there, but they still powered through and played. And I feel like in today's era, you get a slight bruise and you're out of the game for, you're out of one game or you're out of a couple of games. And whether it's because of the player or because of the team, because they've invested so much money in a given player that they are afraid of a player hurting themselves, especially if they are injury prone and they tend to get injured a lot, that they are investing so much money. If we're talking about the amount of money that players are making these days, it's ungodly. But at the end of the day, we have to understand that these players wouldn't be making the said amount of money that they are making if it weren't for the players before that set that foundation and made the game into what it is, where now you're able to make the amount of money that you're making. If it weren't for the players that came before, the players today wouldn't be able to make the said amount of money that they're making. And then additionally, you also have to look at the fans too, where you would not be making the said amount of money that you're also making, the ungodly amount of money that players are making today, if it wasn't for the hard-earned money that fans are paying to finance those said checks, where they're paying increased prices to be able to go to games. And then at the end of the day, you're paying these increased prices or these insane prices to be able to go to a sporting event, and you aren't even able to see those said players that you're paying that said money to see. So
Hmm.
it just seems like it's an unfortunate kind of matter that, like you said, they're trying to figure out ways to kind of resolve. But I do like it too because, let's be honest, when we're talking about veteran players and younger players are going to play with a lot more incentive because they have something to prove. And I feel like that incentive that the younger players are going to play with is going to also incentivize the veteran players, because there is going to be a sense of pride among the all stars to not be shown up by rookie players or sophomore players. So by adding that extra wild card of having a team that is the winner of the Rising Stars contest, I feel that that may help assist with that. I'll also say too, when we're talking about the Rising Stars game and the winner of that game, I like this idea also in that let's be honest, I'm just be transparent. In certain years where we've had the Rising Stars game, it's a game that typically gets looked over unless you really have some significant rookies or second year players in that game and their matchups that you want to see. But if you don't really have a particularly good draft class year, a lot of people are not going to really care about that Rising Stars game. I'm just going to be honest.
You saying you don't want to see Bronny in the Rising Stars game, Brandon? Is that what you're saying?
Let's be honest and transparent that most people, depending on how good a draft year is, are not going to care about that game because they're not going to care about certain players who are playing in that game. So by adding that extra added element of having the winner of that game play against the All Stars, then like you said, it's going to provide more shine to the Rising Stars because it puts more it it allows the Rising Stars game, I feel, to matter more because there is a potential for you to be able to play against the superstars of the game in that said year. But I'll ask you this, Spillman. It does bring up some interesting questions because, as I said, there are going to be three outside of the winner of the Rising Star game. There are going to be three All Star teams, right?
Right.
That we have of all stars, and how are those three teams going to be determined? Because the only reason why I bring that up, yeah, you have the voting component of being able to vote for those top 24, right? Top
Right.
24 teams. If we're doing our math, those top 24 players, excuse me. Where does that leave some other players who, in all in all all given circumstances would be in the game. The only reason why I say that is because two of the players that we are well versed with, if they based it off of the top 24 scores in today's game, LeBron wouldn't be in it and
And
Steph wouldn't
Steph
be in
wouldn't.
it.
They'll get an
According
emeritus one. They're going to
so
get voted in. They're going to
that's
definitely
what I'm
get voted
saying.
in.
So are you going to base it off the top 24 or are you going to use some other gauge to be able to do that with voting to kind of balance that out? Because you're going to have players that people feel should be in the game, but if you're basing it off of numbers, even though they're averaging 20 plus points a game, in terms of where they fall in that hierarchy of top scorers, they're not even in, they're not even in the top 24 as it stands currently today, right now. But I have an idea for that. I do have an idea. What if they did something with what we have with the playoff system that we currently have, where the top 16 teams, or it's not 16 teams, excuse me, top 16 players would be the cutoff, right? Like they're automatically in, and then those next 16 top players fight it out for those last 8 spots. They can do like a one-on-one tournament where they fight out for those last 8 spots. So I'm talking about 16 to 32. So you have 16 to 24 battle it out with 25 to 32.
I maybe that'll work. I don't know. I do. I'm looking at the standings right now, and both players are playing for teams that are number four in the West and number eight in the West. Sure, the Lakers are bad, but if you move the Lakers to the East, they would be the fifth seed. So both are playing on successful teams. I think them being on the this time February, them being on the All Star team, no one is going to bat an eye at that. There've been worse players like Michael Jeffrey Jordan made the All Star team both years for the Wizards, and I don't think that was a good team at all. That team didn't win 40 games. So
You said merit. You
I,
said
uh,
merit.
I didn't say merit. You said merit. I just said,
You said merit.
it's an all-star game. We try to get the most famous people because we still want people to tune into this. I think sometimes we forget that, this is a television show. Basketball is just the topic of the television show, but it's a television show at the end. So they want to have the stars on there. And To have LeBron break the record of All-Star appearances this year with a funky top. I don't know. I definitely think that Steph and LeBron are top 24 players this year. They may not be all NBA players, but they're definitely top 24. They're leading their teams to wins that, lesser players are not able to do. So sure, we're out of the NBA Cup, which is depressing. But we'll get
Yes,
back
you are.
there. We'll get back there one day, ladies and gentlemen. Next year is another year, and next year Browning will lead us to the promised land.
Oh wow, Bron.
After a summer of training in the hyperbaric time chamber with LeBron and learn
Not
to
the
go Super
hyperbolic.
Saiyan. That's right. That's right. He needs to
Not
train.
the hyperbolic
He's
time trade.
Gohan
Okay,
from
go.
from Namek.
Okay,
Yeah,
Gohan. I see you,
he's got to
Gohan.
get his
I
he's got
see
to
you,
get
Gohan.
his potential unlocked by Guru. He's got to get his potential unlocked. So
Uh,
I don't know. I think that, but also this is also a harbinger of what the NBA is trying to do. There's been a lot of talk about um de de like taking geography away from how they set up the teams.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
which this will lend to because if it's an east-west thing, which they've been trying to get away from for a couple of years now, because
They may do it for
there's
the actual playoffs, so they
right,
may
they're
actually for
selling
the
an international product, so people don't care about Memphis versus like Atlanta or something. They don't care about that. They just care it's two teams playing. Much like how we don't see the geographical rivalries in UEFA or some of the European soccer, big soccer leagues. Like I don't really know where half of those teams are because I'm not from over there and I don't really care. But people watch those games and they care about the game, so I feel like that's enough. I don't know if that's a good idea. I think I've always liked the East versus West breakdown of teams. Obviously, they're going to change it sometime. The Bulls used to be in the West, and they moved them to the East. So it just will take some time, I think. But I'm interested to see where they go with this. Steph and LeBron will definitely be on the team. They are crazy. I do want to say that, the number one jersey sold this year. You know who the number one jersey sold this year is?
Um, hmm. Can't be. Is it John? And it's not John Morant.
No,
I'm guessing it's LeBron since you're bringing this up.
it's actually Bronny James. He sold like 500,000 jerseys. So whatever they paid him, whatever you guys have been saying, Bronny is not box office, blah blah blah. They've made his salary several times over in just jersey sales so far. So it was a genius move. That's how you
It's
that's
a
how you build your
collectibles
team.
item. It's not based on play.
No, you know
It's
what
a
it is?
collectibles item to look back and say,
I'll tell
oh,
you
this
what it
was worth
is.
this amount of money when he played that one year.
That's not even it. That's not even it. Fathers have a LeBron jersey in their house, and they got a son in there, and he be running around. He's like, I'm gonna put the boy in a little jersey so he could be the next generation. And that's how they got 500,000 people to buy a Bronny jersey. So, that's great, ladies and gentlemen. That's what you do to make money. But, the Warriors don't do stuff like that. Not at
Oh
all.
wow, wow. But
Yeah.
but the Lakers are still in the cup, right? I'm just checking. They still in the cup, right?
No, the cup
Are they?
doesn't count. Remember, the cup does not count, ladies and gentlemen. We said it's a it's
Now
a
it doesn't
Mickey
count.
Mouse. It doesn't
Now
count.
it
It
doesn't
never
count.
counted. It was like, hey, they just making up tournaments. It's amazing. So you see that, ladies and gentlemen? As soon as he started winning the tournament, now it's like y'all
Uh,
are eliminated. What's
wow,
going on?
you
Y'all
were
not
all
playing no
about it.
games.
You were all over it. You were
I was
all
all over
about
it for sure. I'm all about the inaugural championship. But if y'all lose, I don't want to hear nothing about no cup because I will
oh,
definitely
hey, I
bring it
don't
up.
care. I don't care.
You don't care?
I'm just caring because you cared about it.
That's it. Sure. Sure. That's what they say. That's what they say.
But we're gonna switch gears. I know we were talking about San Francisco. We're gonna go down the road a couple of hours drive, if you will, down to Hollywood and talk about our main topic story, which you guys saw, which is Hollywood salaries revealed above the line versus below the line. And I'm going to bring you guys up to speed for those who may not be be familiar with those terms, I will help you guys out. But before we get into that, I want to backtrack a little bit into just the idea that we are now upon the 1 year anniversary of the last a formal strike. It's hard to believe that it's almost been a year. It feels like yesterday that the last of those Hollywood strikes, that being the SAG after one, concluding on December 5th of last year, and the quickly approaching holiday season. Of course, I thought it would be fun to know about what the income earnings are for those who play a role in the content that we enjoy, whether it's television or film. So, with that being said, thanks to an article from Hollywood Reporter, we have some insight on what these folks are earning, what they're making. And to break down these positions again, I have assorted it into two categories, whether it's below the line positions or versus, I should say, above the line positions. So I actually did a little chart for you guys. So if you bear with me, I will pull it up for you guys. Let's see if I can get this up here. One moment. See if you guys can see that on the screen. Spillman, I'm assuming
Yep, we
you
can
can
see
see
it.
that there. Okay, cool. So if we're I'm gonna start first with below the line. It refers to those production costs that are not included in the above the line portion of the budget. They include those workers who don't provide typically don't provide, input, guidance, creative development, or leadership on a project. So if we're talking about those said positions, we're talking about folks such as the gaffers, the editors, the costume designers. They're typically all paid by the hour, as you can see on the bottom there. So I'm going to go into the first example of those said positions with below the line, and we have, as I said, our gaffers. They're known as the chief lighting technician. They oversee all the lighting equipment, and they work directly with the cinematographer to provide lights and electrical equipment needed on set. And currently, in this climate as it stands, the IATSE organize a chief lighting technician, and IATSE is that organization that, if you recall, was a part of that part of the strike that last year that involved these said workers. Currently, in today's climate, they make about $61 an hour, more specifically $60.59 an hour minimum, and can earn a weekly guarantee of almost $4,000 on studio projects. But I'll be more specific, $3,647. And this again is according to the article that we have in Hollywood Reporter. So Spillman, you hear of our gaffers. What are your thoughts on where things stand? Did you perceive that they made, this amount of money, or did you perceive that it was far less?
Actually, seeing how much they made was interesting. Um, I feel like, this is where the rubber hits the road with these kind of topics. I think the interesting thing about these topics about how much people make for the jobs they're doing is the perceived amount of quote unquote skill that people assign to jobs like these. Um, obviously set designers and stuff do a lot to make a movie, but don't get paid like you would think they would. Case in
Exactly.
point, these lighting technicians um, making a weekly guarantee of $3,600 a week. That sounds like a lot of money, but when you think about it, some of these people are only doing one or two projects a year. So
Exactly.
if
Exactly.
you make it $3,600 on a 10-week thing, that's only like 2,000, $20,000 or something like that. That's not that much money
Exactly.
for something that is such a time-consuming job. Because obviously, with creating art, you don't. It's not a clock-in type of a profession. So, with making movies, it's not really a clock-in type of profession. It's like we need you to be here from September 1 to October 28th or something like that. And then, you're going to get paid through those weeks. And, these guys are working very hard. I think that this is interesting. 3,600 a week sounds like great money, but it also doesn't. You can't. I don't know if you're a gaffer or someone like this. Can't excuse me. Can you do this job and keep a regular daytime job? Because I don't think you can. It's not many jobs that'll let you. Hey, I need to take 10 weeks off to do this other job I'm doing. Most people will fire you for that. So,
But I
um,
also say this to add to what you're saying, Spills, is people kind of sleep on a lot of these, and there are going to be a couple of more that I get into too. Sleep on these what are considered below the line positions, but they play a very pivotal role in that filmmaking process and that TV making series process, because lighting is important. You need to be able to see what's going on the screen, and people kind of, I feel like it is very much an underappreciated art of being able to properly light your actors or a scene for a film or television series. Right now, I'm using lighting, right? If I took the lighting away, the shot that you see right now would be a lot darker.
mhm.
Um, Obviously, I'm not using have the expenses that a film has or a
He doesn't
television
have the ring
series
light,
has,
ladies and gentlemen.
but
I've been
but
telling him to get
still,
one.
like, lighting is lighting, and it's necessary to be able to properly light a given shot. And there's so many times where people, when they're reviewing films or reviewing a television series, they're like, oh, I didn't really see what was going on, or I couldn't make out what was happening. That is a lighting issue. That is a lighting matter of what you're talking about, of being able to understand and be able to perceive what's happening on the screen. And so gaffers are key in being able to have a role in what you're in what's happening there. So but I'm gonna try to move on to our next one, because we do have a couple of other ones that we will get into in terms of our below the line roles. So the next one that I wanted to touch base on were our stunts. So our stunt performers. Of course, for those who are not well versed when it comes to the terms that we have with filmmaking or television, I'm sure even for the most casual person, you have an idea of what stunts are. Of course, they handle the action that's deemed too dangerous for the talent to execute. And in terms of their pay rates, they start at $1,200 a day or 4,500 per week, but can go up depending on the performer. Now, again, to what Spillman was mentioning before, this may seem like a lot of money, but when we're talking about the level of danger and extremes that a lot of these stunt performers are putting themselves through to be able to bring these action sequences that we know to life, it can still be seem pretty minuscule compared to the amount of effort that is being put forth with these said positions. Give me an example of someone who is involved in stunts. Give a shout out to friend to the show, Andy Chang. When after the show airs, I'll provide a link to his to the interview that I had with him. These days, he acts as a coordinator in the world of stunts. So at one point when he was performing a lot of these stunts, now he's choreographing a lot of those scenes. And if you're not familiar with Andy Chang, he when he came up in the industry, he actually was a member of Jackie Chan's stunt team, working on a lot of the films that he had in Jackie Chan's said filmography. If we're talking about Rush Hour, if we're talking about Shanghai Noon, he has some insane stories. So again, I'll put the link when I have a chance to, the link after the show airs of that interview of him nearly dying on the set of Rush Hour 2. If you guys remember Rush Hour 2, in the scene where they're in that yacht and a lot of those characters are kicked off of the yacht when Jackie Chan was fighting him. Andy Chang was one of those characters that fell off the yacht, was kicked off the yacht when they had that action sequence, and he nearly died, believe it or not. So, but I highly recommend that. Check it out. I'll do a quick plug on that. But be that as it may, now as a choreographer, he's had a hand in a lot of scenes that a lot of us appreciate. If we're talking about MCU, I know we talk about Marvel stuff on here a lot, in a lot of those movies he actually choreographed that bus scene from Shang-Chi. From any of the people that saw Shang-Chi and that whole action sequence that we had in Shang-Chi on the bus, that was his scene that he choreographed. So they play those that are in stunts, again, underappreciated. Thankfully, when we're talking about the award season, it's going to actually be a category that's going to be recognized for awards, because to be able to do what they do and to put their body through the amount of stress that they do, whether it's burning themselves or leaping from, you know, crazy distances, or having to go underwater and really put their lives at risk, it really doesn't do justice to, and when we're talking about the amount of money that they're being paid. But Spillman, I'll punt it over to you.
I think this is very eye-opening. The thing that really makes me think of this is recently they put out the um, scene from one of the James Bond movies where allegedly James Bond jumps over three alligators
Yeah,
to safety.
yeah,
They showed the other takes and how many times they took to actually get the take. And this guy almost died three times. Like, it's like the craziest thing I've ever seen. Like,
yeah,
the amount of dedication that these professionals do to only be making $4,500 a week. I don't think my life getting eat up by alligators worth $4,500. I feel like I need a little bit more money to do this, because you could see on the stuntman's eyes the look of, oh, this might be it. Like, this might be it, because like the alligator jumped at him in a certain way and hit him up with those alligator mouth parts. So
yeah,
very scary.
yeah.
Um, $1,200 a day. I think that they definitely deserve that. They probably deserve more. This is a very dangerous job. Like,
It is. It is. And I mean,
um,
I will preface that they say depending on the performer it can go up, but I can't imagine that it's going to be that much more than
they're not making 20
4,500.
million
Even
dollars.
if
They're
they're
not
able to
making 20.
negotiate
Yeah.
it, yeah. Even if they're able to negotiate more money, I can't imagine that that it's way more than $4,500 dollars. But I mean, if it has changed, you guys can let us know, you know, in the comments, because I know we do have some folks that are industry folks that, you know, may have some further insight into that. Perhaps it has gone up a bit, but again, this is what I've been able to pull out of Hollywood Reporter, in the recent breakdown that they had for the rates that a lot of these said, you know, specialists are making. So switching gears to our next position that we have, uh, below the line, and then we're going to get to above the line. We have our editor, and again, I feel like this is a position that even if you aren't well versed with film, you have a general sense of. Of course, you know they're responsible for arranging the production's raw footage. So any of the footage that is shot, whether we're talking television series or film, along with effects and music to create a narrative that matches the vision of the director and the producer. When we're talking about their pay scale, the scale for most television editors is roughly 4,200 a week. However, for top feature editors, it can be as much as $20,000 to $25,000 per week. So when we're talking about these positions, again, I feel like it's also a very lost art. If we're talking about some folks that we have that fall in this category, we've actually had one who was on this show, and he probably falls on the top end of this, in that category that you see mentioned towards the end of top feature editors, and that being John Ottman. If the name doesn't sound familiar to you, it should. John Ottman is a prime time editor. And as a matter of fact, he actually falls in a unique category amongst editors because he's also a composer as well. A lot of the projects that he has edited, he's also provided the acted as composer on. So just to give you an idea of his filmography briefly, he was the composer and editor for The Usual Suspects. He was the composer for the X-Men films from the 2000s, you know, those Bryan Singer ones. So that theme that we have with X-Men that we connect with X-Men and attribute with X-Men. That movie score is his score. And many of the films that Singer has done, he has collaborated with Singer with, because they attended USC back in the day. So they Singer had brought him on with Usual Suspects and had collaborated with him on many of his projects. But if we're talking about, again, top tier editors, he has won an Oscar for his talents as an editor for Bohemian Rhapsody. So I would, correlate that he falls on that top spectrum if we're talking about that range of editors. But again, it is a distinction that I feel like not enough credit is paid to, also because editing is key to be able to properly tell a story. Sometimes the editing in a film can make or break it for audience members being able to capture the necessary pieces that they need from a given story. In order to tell that story, you need to be able to properly place all that footage, that raw footage that you have of a given project, together in a way cohesively that makes sense. And sometimes a scene playing too long can affect how a story goes, or a scene being cut too early can affect how a story is interpreted. So I don't know what your thoughts on it are, Spill, but again, another position where I feel is very much underappreciated.
I feel like this is an underappreciated one, but I feel like these people are making enough money. I feel like
Well, I don't know. Like I see where you're
I feel
coming
like
from, but I
this
would
is like
say, go ahead.
I would say this is like the poor man's version. This is why these are always interesting. And this is why they tell you not to tell people how much you make. Because people will look at stuff like this and be like, I could look at some raw video footage and cut it together to make it look right.
No.
We see thousands of people make YouTube edits all the time, for free, with found footage and make interesting cuts. So I feel like this is a job that makes a lot of money, comparatively, but obviously the editor does a lot of quote unquote work. I imagine the editors put more hours in than other people do, because of the nature of just how long it takes to go through stuff and splice it together and everything. That's a very difficult, um, process and tedious. So maybe they're getting paid for the ad tedium, as they say. But I just, I think that they are doing good, but I don't think that this is. I don't feel like the editors need more money. I feel like they're making plenty of money. Like
Well, I'll
twenty
say
thousand
this.
dollars, $20,000. In America today, $20,000 a week is not a low amount of money, um to me, but that's for the top people. I don't imagine that other people, like your regular editors, are making that much. So I don't know.
So I'll say this, Spills, and I understand where people may be coming from when they say $20,000, 20 to 25,000 is a lot. But I'll preface it by saying this, and now, especially now that we're about to get into the above the line positions afterwards, is that when we're talking about these below the line positions, even with the editor that seems like on the high end in terms of earnings, just like you had mentioned before, there's no guarantee of how many projects you're doing. So, say if you are only doing 2 films or 3 films in a given year, it may not turn out to be a lot. It may be your overall earnings in the entire year because you've only worked on 2 films in a given year, especially if you are dedicating as much time as you are on a given a project. And if we're talking about a lot of the films that we have, especially those award-winning films, a lot of those award-winning films are not short films. A lot of times we have some films that are crossing beyond the 2 hour mark. And when you're crossing upon past that 2 hour mark, that's a lot of footage to go through to be able to cut it down to 2.5 hours, to cut it to 2 hours. That's months and months of footage that is captured, and this is not even including, especially when we're talking about genre related films, that means you're also waiting on other departments to finish what they have with special effects and being able to fit those special effects shots into a given project seamlessly, to be able to also fit in the music that you have in a said project. So what the composer had worked on, and being able to seamlessly fit that into what you have into a given project, which is why, again, shout out to Ottman, why it is so rare to be able to have both of those distinctions, because it kind of bridges the gap of not having to coordinate with another department or another person to be able to do your job. Like, since he does both, he doesn't have to wait on that process of the composer, because he is also the composer. So he also has that luxury too, which is very rare. You don't really have composers who are also editors. But again, going to what you're saying, we have these rates that we have seen here, but a lot of folks don't understand when we're talking about a lot of these folks that are in the industry. We're talking about the gross earnings. It is not the net earnings that they're taking home. A lot of times, with many of these folks that are working in these given departments, they're paying other fees. They're paying for representation, whether it's an agent or a manager, and that's already 10%, 10, 15% off the top of what your gross is. So if we're talking about someone who is an editor, or we're talking about someone who is acting in one of those other distinctions, they're not taking this gross pay. They're taking the net pay of what we're seeing here, and it's not a guarantee that they're going to have multiple jobs in a given year. And this is, of these positions, these quote unquote below the line positions, this is like the top tier of what those payments are. And it's not always the norm among other people who are quote unquote working individuals in these said fields. These are people at the top of their said fields of the said, low below the line positions. So that's something to keep in mind too.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that just I feel like this is why when how much people make comes out, we always say like, how are they making this much money? Because people feel like they can do things. I don't think people feel like they can be stuntmen. I think people feel like they could be editors. But let's move on to the some of the above the line people, because I feel
Indeed.
like that's where the
Indeed.
money is.
Indeed. So let's get into above the line. Um, and I will switch gears with what we have with our slide here. So again, above the line, a lot of it's going to be the opposite of what I discussed with below the line. They refer to those that are responsible for the creative development, production, and direction of a film or TV show. So a lot of times, these are the people that are at the head, that are the major decision makers that you have. A lot of times, we're talking about below the line. They are the folks who are executing a lot of these decisions that are made at the top of these respective roles. So with the above the line crew members are typically paid a fixed rate that's agreed upon before production starts. And examples of these said above the line positions include executive producers, screenwriters, directors, and principal actors. Now, I do have an asterisk with actors, which we'll get into now, and there's a reason for that. So as you can see on the above, principal actors are those that are the top bill actors and actresses who headline a TV or movie. A lot of times you're seeing their names on the posters and their faces on the posters promoting those said movies. When we're talking about the the uh, uh, the distinction, our principal cast members are typically are those that are above the line, but actors can also be below the line. So when we're talking about actors that are below the line, we're talking about those background actors, stand-ins, film actor doubles are considered below the line. So with that being said, I'm gonna get into some of the pay, which I'm sure many of you guys hear oftentimes, or they're talking about or any articles that talk about Hollywood, but I'll break it down anyway. When we're talking about TV, 400,000 to 600,000 an episode is not unheard of for your well-known TV stars. There are a select few that make 1 million an episode. When we're talking about films, those at the level of Ryan Reynolds, we're talking about Ryan Reynolds, maybe Hugh Jackman, let's see, Tom Cruise. They're making 30 million per picture. However, you have those that are in that rarefied stratosphere when it comes to their earnings. Someone like Robert Downey Jr., which, as you can see here, is earning allegedly 80 million plus to play Doctor Doom in the upcoming Avengers movies. Obviously, when we're talking about actors, this fluctuation in earnings is pretty substantial. Even series background actors, especially if we're talking about those that are SAG and AFTRA actors that are a part of that union, they can earn up to $216 for an 8-hour day. So if we're talking about a major project where maybe they are asked to be a part of a film as an extra for a week or a couple of weeks, they can earn, a decent paycheck. But again, I stress the fact that there are other fees. This is just a gross amount. There are other fees that are being paid when we're talking about the earnings here, whether we're talking about representation, whether we're talking about a stylist, all those things that go into being an actor. But I'll punt it over to you, Spill.
Um, I feel like controversially, actor is the most I could do this job in the world. I feel like, although it's possibly one of the hardest you could actually do this, because to connect emotionally through a camera lens is something that very few people could do. Um, these numbers are not surprising, obviously. People like Robert Downey Jr. and Ryan Reynolds drive eyes and wallets to theaters and to projects. So, I'm sure that though Robert Downey Jr. is going to make $800 million, $80 million for this movie, it's going to make 10 times that amount of money. So I don't feel like that is a crazy amount, because most people will see the Doctor Doom movie because Robert Downey Jr. is Doctor Doom. They don't as much care about the other actors. And that's interesting to see that the on the low end you're guaranteed just $27 an hour. That's like, working at a call center or something. So that's interesting. I'm surprised that it's as low per hour for background actors as it is, but that seems to be a livable wage if you get picked up for these things. But I don't think anybody's making a living being a background actor.
Yeah.
So
They aren't, and I could speak testament to that, when we're talking about background actors. So back in the day, young, way younger, I had an opportunity to be an extra in a couple of films that had shot here in DC. Because so oftentimes when we're talking about films that deal with government or espionage, DC is normally a place that is utilized as a location, even though it is a expensive place to shoot a film. Um, if they're not utilizing another location to act as DC, they will come right to the source and actually shoot in DC. And while that amount that they have listed for background actors seems like a lot, it's not always guaranteed that you're going to, even on a big budget film, there's no guarantee that you're going to work weeks at a time as an extra, because there are so many extras. So a lot of times, if you're lucky, you'll work a week. You maybe will work 1 to 3 days on average, but it is not always a given to work. Even on those big budget films that have huge budgets, it's not a guarantee that you're going to be working weeks at a time on a said film as a background actor, because there are so many extras that are that a film may utilize, where there's not a need to have someone for an entire week when they can have someone else come in for a couple of days as well. Um, and additionally, I'll again stress, while it seems like a lot of money for a lot of the actors that we have said here, and I think this is kind of thing that kind of got lost in translation when people were being told about the strike, is that these high income earners, when we're talking about out of 100% of actors, these are like the one percenters, right? These are the one
These are
percenters
the
that are
one
earning,
percent of the one
yeah,
percent.
yeah, that are earning ungodly amounts of money. But a lot of actors out there are working actors, and they're making, barely a livable wage. And the reason why they're making barely a livable wage is that, unlike some of the one percenters that are mentioned here, they're only, they maybe have a couple of projects. They are working as they are able to book projects, and they don't have things lined up for their entire year in terms of work that they have. And even then, uh, in instances where they do have that, they may not be among the top 1% income earners. They may just be able to have a livable wage because, again, if we're talking about that gross amount, a lot of it is being divvied up elsewhere with the other things that are needed when you are an actor. That representation, if we're talking about an agent or manager, those people that you rely upon to be able to find you work, you still have to pay regardless of what income it is that you're making. So uh I just wanted to be able to stress that, because I know there was that attitude during the strike of, oh, well, a lot of these actors make millions upon millions of dollars. I know it seems that way, but it's a very small percentage of the actual acting working force that's out there. So but switching gears to our next above the line position, and that's going to go into our directors. Again, I feel like this kind of goes without saying, even if you aren't well versed with entertainment. I feel like most people, casual folks, have an idea of directors, film directors. They oversee the overall creative aspects of a production. They visualize the script while guiding both actors and technical crew to capture their vision for the screen. In terms of their earnings, we have directors who are, in the earlier part of their career. In terms of their filmography, they're earning about $1 million, if not less. If they're a part of the Directors Guild of America, their pay scale is slightly different, especially on high budget films. They're earning nearly 24,000 a week with a guaranteed employment of 10 weeks. However, when we're talking about, and again, this is talking about scaling, right? When we're talking about those household name directors, our Ridley Scotts, our Christopher Nolans, our Tim Burtons, they can earn upwards of $20 million a picture. So, Spillman, I'll punt it over to you. What are your thoughts when we're talking directors?
I feel like this is a place where I can see why people make the money that they make, because the choices of the director, you know, really affect how a movie is shot and how a movie is interpreted by people. You know, so many of us go to so many of the like cinephiles and people who really like movies like specific directors. Like it's not just that, oh, I like this person because they're a cool person. It's normally because of the choices they make for that specific profession. So I just think that it's obviously a good job. That I feel like this is the thing where I feel like people don't think that they can make the like choices. To me, well, just as a layman, obviously I'm not a expert at these kind of things, but I feel like the things that directors do, like famous directors like your Tarantinos or Spielbergs or Ridley Scott, in this example, what they choose to put on the screen and how they choose to um, the choices they make with storytelling are very interesting, and I think that they did get what they deserve. I know that there was a strike recently, um, but I feel like they are the ones that exert the most control in the industry as far as the people who are not the ones that are signing the checks. So I feel like that they're compensated well for what their jobs are. I think that if they were less paid, I feel like this is like a thing like with the NBA, how coaches are being paid now more because they go out and win championships. If you go out and win championships, you're gonna make money. If you go out and sell blockbusters like a Ridley Scott, you're gonna make money. So I just think that that's very interesting and really where the thing should be.
No, I agree. And if, when we're talking about, I feel like we're in a day and age where the I remember there was a time where actors, especially those quote unquote one percenters that we were just mentioning before, were names that helped to sell films or to get films made or to promote films, especially if we're talking about the promotional period in which we have for a film when we're seeing trailers and things like that or seeing posters. A lot of times there was an era where those celebrity actors or actresses help their name help to sell a film, and in this day and age I feel like it's not just the actors, is even the filmmakers. We have celebrity, I feel, filmmakers now, where, not to say that we never had them, but I feel like in the same way that actors are selling films more so at one time, the filmmakers and some of the other names that we have involved in that filmmaking process are helping to sell a lot of projects. There's a another another group of people, which we'll get into next, that I feel are also helping to sell said projects. But I feel like directors are very much falling, in that category more so than they did in the past. I mean, I feel like there was only maybe a handful of directors that you had in the past growing up. If I'm talking about the 90s and the 2000s, where their name would automatically, if perhaps they pitched it at a studio, would probably get something greenlit, or if people saw it plastered in a trailer or on a poster, it would convince them to see the movie. If we're talking about, Steven Spielberg, would be an example of that. Um, in this era right now, Christopher Nolan is that name. And I mean, even back then, even outside of Steven Spielberg, we had Tim Burton was another name that fell into that category.
George Lucas.
George Lucas, there you go. But like I said, there were maybe a handful in those, and I feel like in that era, if we're talking about the 70s, 80s, 90s, so on and so forth. But I feel like in this area, I feel like that group has expanded in terms of those names that gets people to check out films. Paul Anderson, there are quite a few number of films, because there's a, I feel with filmmakers, there is a pedigree now and an expectation and an understanding of what is expected when you have that name attached to a given project, whether it's film or TV. So I
I
absolutely agree.
I would disagree with you. I feel like directors have always been a box office thing. Go back to Hitchcock. You can go back to Coppola in the '70s and stuff. Somebody like M. Night Shyamalan today. I feel like a good director, once we know that you make good movies, we're gonna come back and see you. Spike Lee is a great example of a guy like that. Jordan Poole, like I feel like once you are known as a good director, you kind of can print gold with movies. People will go see your movies. You can have three or four bad movies and they're still going to see them. Whereas I feel like as an actor, if you have a bad movie, like they're kind of done with you. Like, Brendan Fraser was on top of the world, on top of the world. He did like one too many mummy movies, and then everybody was like, ah, we're all for Brendan Fraser. So I feel like it's a little bit more fickle for other above the line salaries and stuff. But I feel like the director is the most tied to success in the box office. Um,
Well, I was gonna say, well, let me say this, and maybe it wasn't. I'll clarify is that I'm not saying that directors weren't household names
Hmm.
back then. I'm saying that 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 club, so to speak, of those
It's
household
gotten
name
bigger.
directors
Yeah,
has gotten bigger. Years before, there was a very finite, I feel, group of names where those names were recognized as the pinnacle of directors when we're talking about filmmaking. And it's not to say that there weren't other filmmakers that were just as capable or nearly at that level. It's just I feel like now, currently, as there has been a more spotlight, there's been seems to be more of a spotlight with filmmakers more so than there has been with actors. That group of recognized filmmakers has expanded versus the way it's been in the past, where I feel like you could probably count them offhand who those
I
directors
agree
were
with
at that
that.
time. Um, but moving on to our next category, next one that I want to get into would be our TV writers and or screenwriters. Again, goes without saying, write scripts for a variety of mediums, whether it's feature films, TV shows, commercials, or video games. They help create the story, the characters, and the dialogue. When we're talking about their compensation, thanks to the WGA strike, so the Writers Guild of America strike that happened last year, staff writers now make nearly $5,000 per week for a guaranteed 20 weeks, and the average draft, so a draft of a script that they put together, sells for between $350,000 and $500,000. However, when we're talking about established feature writers, so those doing working on film, it can be um, more than $1 million on the high end, and it also includes final credits of $150,000 to a $500,000 bonus. So, Spillman, of course, we have some terrific writers, some screenwriters out there. Some of them who go on to be producers in their own rights, which we'll get into next. But I mean, when we're talking about screenwriters, one person who comes to mind immediately when I think of screenwriting is Aaron Sorkin. But I mean, there are others out there. I know you mentioned, um, what is it? Mentioned, I'm brain farting. This is bad because we just talked about him just now when we're talking about Pulp Fiction. Quentin
Oh, Quentin
Tarantino,
Tarantino. Yeah,
yeah, is a well-known screenwriter. We have some writers out there who you probably wouldn't know that they began their careers as writers or are perhaps more recognized for their directing, but they're actually writer directors. Another example of that would be Spike Lee. But reason why I bring up Quentin Tarantino is, I'm a big horror guy. I love the film From Dusk Till Dawn, at least the first one anyway. And he wrote that film. A lot of people always connect that with him, but it was directed by Robert Rodriguez.
yeah. He didn't
Robert
even direct
Rodriguez
it.
directed it and he wrote it. So, what are your thoughts on this discipline and where things stand with the compensation?
I dare say that this is the most needed part of Hollywood. I feel like the writers are the real people that make the things go. I feel like there's a reason why Hollywood is always optioning book franchises and stuff, because they need to find something that connects with human beings. And if you don't have the writing that connects, you don't make no dollars. Like, you can have everything. Like, there's been so many movies that have a great director, great actors, great promotion. It's in Burger King and McDonald's. It's on your
Great special
Coca-Cola.
effects,
The
all of that,
special
and
effects are cool, and it's just written goofy. So it's just like, why are we even watching this? Um, I feel like they make good, better money now. A lot of the things with how they break down these salaries based on how things are monetized for the studios is changing. So that's a very interesting thing, because writers get more credit, quote unquote, now than they used to. Um, because a great written story is a great written story. You can get
Yeah,
Joe Blow to act it, and that's part of the thing too. Is so much now people are going to see characters, and writers are the ones that make characters. Actors embody the characters and they put in things, but on the page is on the page. Like if you
yeah,
don't have something on the page to work from, you could be Denzel, and you can falter in a movie if it's not written well. So I just think that
sure.
the writing is where it really hits the road. I feel like in our culture, we don't give writers as much credit as they deserve. Um, and I think that's a shame, but we'll get back to it soon, I hope.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I feel like what you said. I'm not going to probably add too much more to what you said, but the one thing that I will say is when we're talking about writers, right, and the lack of control that they have over their said property that they have shaped on the page, oftentimes gets I feel like butchered is too strong of a word, but it gets adapted in various other ways by so many other parties that by the time it reaches its endpoint after whether you're doing a TV series or a film, it may not look like what the original property was when it was first put together. And sometimes, for the writer, that could be frustrating, which I feel why so oftentimes you have a lot of writers that end up becoming directors because they'll have a little more say in what's happening and creative control of what's happening on their said project. But I do agree with you. In this day and age where we have so many properties that are relying upon spectacle, I feel like there is a need to be able to focus back in on story. And don't get me wrong, spectacle is great. Spectacle is awesome. I love big blockbuster projects, big projects with big budgets and have a lot of spectacle. But a lot of that spectacle means nothing if there's not a interesting story to tell and you don't have interesting characters. A lot of those things fall flat without having that foundation of a story. So I absolutely agree in that respect. So that is going to delve into the last role that we're going to talk about now, and that goes into executive producers and showrunners. This is really more of a thing that happens more so in television than it does in film. In film, yes, you have your executive producers, but when we're talking about television, it plays a more unique role. But I'll go into the roles real quick. They pull the strings, so to speak, on a project, securing funds for production, hiring staff, and outlining the long term schedule. They also make the final call on scripts, on casting, and writers that are on staff. More often not, and this is again a lot of times when we're talking about what you see in TV, more often times than not, they also write for the show as well, writing specifically or typically with those major episodes of a given series, such as the pilot, which is the very first episode, like the very first episode of a series, the season premieres, so the start of new seasons. Those season finales, so the end of given seasons, or even series finales when a show is ending, and they're often credited as the creator of the show. So when we're talking about these said individuals, good examples of our showrunners, our executive producers would be Joss Whedon if we're talking about Buffy, would be Greg Nicotero if we're talking about The Walking Dead, or some good examples. Um, and also, I wanted to also point this out as well. Not all executive producers are writers on a show. Sometimes you can have non-writing executive producers who assist the showrunner in everyday operations. Now, their compensation is quite diverse. So I actually
Oh
had to have a
yeah.
separate page for it. You have first look deals that are possible, and you also have overall deals. For those that are not aware, those first look deals are basically they provide more flexibility for the producer to be able to pitch something to a studio in which the studio has the first look at a given project, but it's not owned by the studio. The in these first look deals, typically that producer can shop that said project to someone else in those first look deals, and they don't have that flexibility in overall deals. Um, with that said, when we're talking these first look deals, they can range in the mid seven figures and up, and they put that specific detail in there if you're lucky to land one, because it's not typically done a whole bunch. For veteran producers, it can be upwards of $2 million up front and more on the back end. If we're talking on the television side, non-writing producers, which I mentioned before, without studio deals, don't earn a dime until the pilot fee. So if we're talking that first episode of a series, which can range from 15,000 to 50,000, writers who are executive producing and running their own shows can sell a pilot script into development for between $225,000 and $500,000. If it's ordered to series, meaning that it's ordered to have an entire series done or an entire season done, they'll make 60,000 to 75,000 per episode on average to produce. On top, now again, this is on top of the WGA, the Writers Guild of America scale that I mentioned prior on any episodes that they write. Now, if we're talking about a lot of these overall deals, 40 million overall mega deals. Um, what they're seeing is 10 to 15 million dollars in terms of what they're seeing out of those 40 million or so mega overall mega deals, and they're seeing about 8 million out of those 15 million overall deals. So Spillman, a lot of variation here. However, I feel like when we're talking about these executive producers, they are those quote unquote puppet masters that we have in a given project. And a lot of times these executive producers are carrying a lot of hats. So I feel like when we're talking about these variations and these various means of compensation is warranted.
Yeah, I think that the producers are the ones that really make things go. You know, the one that obviously that not obviously, but the one that really comes to mind about producers and giving. What's up, Ray? How's it going? How's it going, brother? I hope you had a great turkey day, and they weren't cleaning chitlins in your house. I hope they weren't. Uh, but yeah, like Quincy Jones famously was the producer of The Fresh Prince of Bel Air, and I don't feel like without Quincy Jones putting his money behind it, and his name behind it, that show would have ever been made. So I feel like producers get things made. I don't feel like they draw people to projects as much. Obviously people like Spielberg being a producer on something really helps to draw people to it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I just think that this, and also their compensation is so much structured so much different than like the people at the lower levels. Like, producers getting money on the back end. Like I said earlier with people making like people like Robert Downey Jr. making $80 million for a picture. The producer might make that much as well, but they put up way more money as risk up front to get the project going. So to me, I feel like these people are definitely compensated well. We know they make buku bucks. We hope one day to be making money like a Hollywood, a big time Hollywood producer.
Stay
Um,
tuned.
yeah, yeah, that's right, ladies and gentlemen.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. Studio Spill coming to a theater near you. Yeah, so I don't know. I just feel like, obviously these people make plenty of money. They are not staying at the Sisters of the Poor or anything. So I feel like they make plenty of money. They're in a good place.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. As I said, in terms of what they're doing and being a part of that entire development process before any other parties, oftentimes are a part of it. a lot of times they are there at the beginning before you're getting your directors, before you're getting your actors, before you're getting any of your crew people, and they're carrying on even beyond that in post, to ensure the success of this said investment, this said project that they got off the ground. That it would make sense that there are these various diverse means of being able to when you're able to earn this amount of money. Ray, you are funny, bro. But I hear you. I hear you, sir. Um, uh, but yeah, like it absolutely makes sense in terms of what they have at their disposal in terms of revenue streams to be able to make a living based on what they're bringing to the table from pre-production to production to post-production. Um, and I mean, we do have some, and I know I have mentioned examples with what is it with Joss Whedon or Greg Nicotero. We do have some examples of folks that are on that end when we're talking about typically not seen as writing producers that are still well-known producers. You have Joel Silver, that's out there. For those who aren't familiar with Joel Silver, he produced the Lethal Weapon films. He produced the Matrix movies. If we're talking about Jerry Bruckheimer, he's done so many projects with Will Smith. Speaking of Will Smith, and he also produced the what is it, the Pirates of the Caribbean films. He was a producer on those films. So yeah, like there's so many diverse. I think at the end of the day, there's so many diverse parties that are involved in the filmmaking process, and even in the development of the television series that we know and love, or even streaming shows that we love. And I feel like it really becomes pivotal in understanding or appreciating what a lot of these parties bring to the table. Because while I know we had talked about it over the course of doing this segment of the show, why it may seem like a lot of these parties are earning insane amounts of money, especially when we were talking about above the line. It seemed like they were livable wages. When you put it in the context of it being gross amounts versus net pay that they're actually taking home, it it provides a very sobering picture of what what folks are earning for a lot of this content that we enjoy, especially considering those at the top that are earning multi hundreds millions of dollars, or even billions would be, and not really sharing the wealth. So but that is, unless you had any further thoughts, we are going to wrap it up, Mr. Spills, unless you had any further comments.
I just,
But
Ray, I got you. I got you. Just, click on the link in the bio, as they say.
uh, but that's going to do it for this week's show. Thank you guys so much for watching, whether you're watching it now or even watching it after the fact. As always, Spill, I'm going to punt it over to you. Can you tell folks where they can find you?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you can catch me on Instagram at Truly Spill. Thanks again for another great week. Call your family members. I'm sure you argued with them this weekend about things that you really shouldn't argue with your family about, and just say, you crazy, but I still love you. It's too many fights within families, and that is too much stress on yourself. Don't contribute to uh, you know, winter onset depression, and continue to fight the good fight. So have a great holiday, and don't spend too much money. Giving Tuesday is just around the corner. Give to your favorite charities. Make sure that they know that you care about them.
All
Back to
right,
you,
well
Brendan.
said. Well said. So again, thanks to Spillman. Well said, sir. When we're talking about, I feel like in today's society, how much division we have. there needs to be more fellowship and collaboration. I feel like in today's society with all the things that are going on. But I will get off my soapbox. You can find me at Brandon Troy ENT on. Let me see if I can get this up. Oh, that came up. There we go. On Instagram and or say Brandon Troy underscore ENT on Instagram and Brandon Troy ENT on here we go on Twitter or X as folks like to coin it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be safe out there, guys, and I guess see y'all soon. Bye, guys.
Later, Gators. Peace. Peace. We're still live.
One sec. You have some glitches happening. Hold on.
That's right. Oh, there we go. Uh-oh, we're still live. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Another week down.